Boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Eu tô aqui com um time. Eu não sou Ancelotti, mas eu tô com um time aqui.
I have this great team,
E posso dizer o seguinte:
and I can tell the following. The data economy has become one of the central pillars of the digital transformation of the financial sector. This growing digitalization, the capacity to collect, build, store, and analyze a huge volume of data. Data has become the main agent of how data is treated, and therefore have become relevant players in the system of monetization of data. How to develop data ecosystems that allow consumers, we are the data proprietors, to unblock the real value of data, talking about opportunities of monetization and so on. And I have a team of specialists in this field. Here come the leading exponents of this.
Mas aqui, eu trouxe aqui para vocês, por favor.
So please, Alexandre Minato, CTO of Santander Brazil.
Leandro
Rocha de Andrade, Chief Data Analytics Officer of Itaú.
O
Rafael Cavalcante, Director of Data Intelligence and CRM of Bradesco. And Tabata Sakurai, Head of Data at BTG Pactual.
Gente, eu vou começar só com uma provocação aqui.
I will show you a question. Who knows what is done with the data that you send to banks? Raise your hands. Yeah, there you see. That's a great example that we have a lot to discuss. It's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you very much for being here. And let's start with a general question of everybody. Okay, I'm just going to look at time. When the time is over, that's it.
Gente, navegar pela
navigating this complex network of data, custody, propriety, and so on is a huge challenge. How do your institutions insert themselves in this ecosystem of monetization of data, hyper-personalizations, and what kind of business opportunities do you see for banks? Is it interesting to become a data broker? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for those of you who are here for the last session of the day, before the beer and the entertainment. In the name of BTG Pactual, in 2021, we acquired a company. So our concern with data, of client data, has been in place for quite some time. We anticipate the open finance movement. So we also had a strategy that was better known.
Falando pouco do que a gente.
What did we build up at BTG in this respect? So when we went to the retail sector, we were born inside the cloud already. So the fact that we're on the cloud facilitated the construction of robust architecture and to include our strategies and our models, and this was done without any concern about legacy. To summarize the vision at BTG Pactual, we always say that data has been like petroleum. This has been true since 2017 approximately. So building robust data architectures is no longer something new. Banks are able to do this and they have been able to do so for some time. But today, the question is, how do you extract value from all of this? Can you synthesize this information? The question is, are you able to summarize, create true value, generate new information based on everything that you already have? This is how we see it at BTG. Data, oil data. Renato, your opinion. I agree with Tabata. And, oil data is oil, and oil leaks, right? So we have to be very careful in this respect. Data comes together a whole bunch of other things it goes hand in hand with security, aggregated value for clients. So it's a set of elements that we have to deal with. And we start to discuss whether you're a data broker or not. Each company will try to find out how it sees itself in this ecosystem. So we have Santander as a bank, but there are companies that are associates. There are more than 20 companies that are part of the ecosystem of Santander. Obviously, all of this is legal. We have our data broker. So today I'm able to understand in the client's income or revenues. I can allow the companies that are part of the group to see this information as well. But people complain about the fact that, there's this issue of selling data. Yes, we do have sensitive information. We can identify the customer's behavior if you look at the client's bank statement. So obviously that there is a lot that is related to ethics and being careful, but statistically speaking, we are able to identify the client's profile, and based on this, we can start identifying what kind of opportunities we have for this client. And so in the course of time, we start to look at embedded finance. When we think of embedded finance, we have to see, we cannot no longer see open finances initiative, data is the initiative. Everything is coming together in terms of what we have to solve for clients. So monetizing data, there are 2 points of view here. One is how does the client see value when the client sends his data, moves data from one bank to another. So how do we make this value become a benefit for the shareholder? So we have to look at this from the point of view of the client. We have to look at this from the point of view of the shareholder. This intersection is what we are searching for consistently. How do we look after the client? How do we compensate the shareholder? So this connection between the shareholder and the client, and we can extract a lot of value from this connection. Rafael Cavalcante, your words.
Conceito que a Tabata e o Minato colocaram aqui do petróleo.
Well, I'm going to go back to Tabata and Minato said, this analogy that data is the new oil, petroleum. We can look at data as in radioactive elements such as uranium. You can generate things of high value, generate energy, healthcare treatment, but at the same time, if it's poorly managed, then there are negative consequences. Uranium can also be used to manufacture weapons and so on. But structurally speaking, the organizations are converging in the way they look at data and linked to a consumption chain or a distribution chain. So the natural evolution is associated with decline of less structured data and more associated with pure hardware. This entails the difficulty of chaining a vision of distribution of a broker. So in the last 5 years, the conceptual view of data mesh converging with data production goes through the fact that we have the readiness of having this immediate consumption chain in the bank, a consumption chain of in-house ecosystem, which Bradesco Financiamento, Bradesco Consortium, together with a regulatory framework, which is the case of our open finance. So these products of data being inter-exchanged, so technologically and naturally, there's this convergence, there's this feeling of making data available, and how these ways of consumption can capture value explicitly and can capture value implicitly. And if you allow us to use your data, then this has implicit value, and with this data I can aggregate more value to what I offer the client. Leandro.
So, Leandro, petroleum and uranium, one explodes, the other one is the atomic bomb. But tell us a little bit to us. Well, both bring benefits to humanity. Now, making an analogy between data and oil, that was the cover of a big magazine last year, it is precise. And I like what Cavalcante brought here because, in fact, it can be quite beneficial to society, but if wrongly used, it's awful. But the analogy with oil has the problem because petroleum When you use the derivatives, that is the end product of refining petroleum, the value is over. So you have a whole chain and the end product is not valued, but data you reuse. Cavalcante mentioned the subproducts of data, byproducts of data, and it's important. But how can we monetize data aside from the bank? Well, the first point, and I don't want to be repetitive, but it is governance, privacy of data. So the most important thing is to treat clients' data as we treat the financial resources of the client. It is exactly the same way, with all care. So there's a term that was used here that was wonderful, because you said that petroleum leaks and you have a leakage in the pipe, and that's true. This is some care we must take. So whenever the client data, that is something very important in our system, ecosystem enters, we need to treat it quite well. In the bank, we use a data mesh, so we have an architecture that conceptually processes information distributed, and the most important is all the security of resources are applied in each one of the data mesh. But it's not only technological security requirements. We also have people that are responsible in each one of the communities dealing with data, and we have more than 100 people with the role of taking care of the privacy of the client. Taking care of the security of data with good practices and procedures. So this is the most important point. We don't sell data, but we monetize it internally. In the communities, exchange with banks, with the solutions that we offer. So we talked about open finance. And this is an important way of exchanging information or giving custody of the client's information among banks. And the main point is all the monetization forms we have in the bank have a single objective: to improve the experience of the client with the bank. No matter if the client is an individual or a legal entity, it's a basic concept. We don't look at the data and say, hey, let's sell it and make money. No, that's not it. But a data to improve the client's lives and consequently give benefits to the shareholders is what we want to work with. Respecting clients' data is something important, and it's the most important thing. All the rest is better technology, best people to process the information, the best processes of information security, the best regulatory issues to support us with that. So this is how we deal with data monetization in the organization. Wonderful. And now we get to the client side. So we started discussing here about people knowing how data is treated. Just a few raised their hands. I don't know, and I admit it. So my question now is, data monetization goes beyond the valuable operation of data with ecosystem partners and insurance companies and retailers and even governmental agencies, but it brings new regulatory challenges. People here, I guess everyone, 100% here, are worried about what we'll do with the data and how to regulate that. So the question is, and I'll start with you, is how the central bank and other regulators can foster even more the change of data into personal capital, because the data belongs to you. So how is that? Well, it is as it is already, because I think we've had two big regulatory movements that helped us a lot in this sense. The first one is when we talk about the general law on transparency of data. So we analyze the legal basis and all banks and companies that are regulated by that. Well, they need to have a catalog on what they do, and when we ask for client's consent, you need to explain exactly what you do with the data. And today we have much more transparency. So if you are there at Santander opening a bank account, the client, when the client gets there, they know what we'll do with that data. So this is an important step on transparency in the use of information. And the second one was to have the client as the data holder. It is something some good advancement we had with open finance. I believe among the colleagues here, the only one in the global bank, and we deal with 13 different countries. When we explain open finance here, we believe that we have 6-7 billion calls a month in the APIs of open finance. They believe it's an absurd, but it is much more than that if we consider the amount of APIs there and here. And when we explain PIX, it's quite difficult for people abroad to understand uh, how huge is the evolution we had when we put the client as the holder, the owner of that. If the client doesn't understand the value of sharing data in open finance, they cancel the sharing. So it makes us once again search for a way of delivering a different experience. So what is quite rich in this sense is that as we started our journeys, we had a group saying, no, this is nothing. We'll have the PSD2 that ran outside the country and nothing happened. But when we had that and we see that at least in Santander that we have an amount of transactions per second in a PIX, in the case of open finance, it's 3 times higher the peak of TPS. So what does it mean? It means that the amount of information navigating among institutions today is huge. And it is all commanded by the client. So today, we live on this world where the client is entitled to their own data. Companies need transparency on what they do with their data, what kind of data. So when you ask for the complete dossier, the organization has to explain the client the information they have. It has a legal basis. So what I do with the data needs a legal basis, and we have a whole area dealing only with the legal basis to ensure that we are in compliance with law and client transparency. So we started this movement, and it is getting more and more powerful. So I guess the regulator had an important role in this sense. So I think this step of the regulator made all companies to move as well, because the holder of the data is the client, and they want that. So Rafa, as I understood, I don't have to do anything anymore. Is that so? Well, I believe that the way data is used is also very complex, and the kind of data that we deal every day is more complex as well. So 10, 15 years ago, if we think, basically bank data would be tables, and this structured data would be treated much more ad hoc. So we need responses to that. And the complexity that all this discipline of machine learning is there, where more and more we have competitive differential generated in the combination of more genetic models that are tuned or customized with data of clients and data of the organization. It is much more complex to publish these principles. So we still have important barriers to break, but I think inverting the onus and dealing with clients is a privilege, and it's trusting. So we give consent, and we have some legal obligations on that. And mainly, we understand that the fact of data existing doesn't mean that it can be used for anything. So if I have a picture of the house of the client, I think it would be extremely invasive. However, if it is an information that is associated to being a controller of the company, it can be a mandatory aspect to money laundering compliance. So using the heightened weight of the client for the customization of a T-shirt can be adequate to do. But using the same information to differentiate prices is unacceptable. I'm sorry, weight and height is bank data. No, but hypothetically, we could have this information. And you believe this is good for the customization of an offer, and you don't need all the time to say that you wear M T-shirts, medium T-shirts. So please, Tabata, organize everything. What do you think of all that? I agree with my colleagues. I believe we talked a lot about responsibility on data, and I agree with Minato that BCE is working a lot in regulating everything. So much so that this year they said that the goals for 25 and 26 is to regularize and better understand the use of banks in AI. It's a little of the goals of BCG, whether in PIX and Open Finance or now in Data Prev and other measures that the central bank is taking and automated PIX that will start this year. It all goes along with this view that we are ahead of time in Brazil in the sense of the use of data and the opportunities that the banks might have and how to regulate that. And this position is very important so that it's not necessary, for example, for every bank to search for public data or search for other suppliers and so that we have a safe way to deal with that the client is safe on sharing the data with the institution in such a way that they authorize it and that it makes sense for the institution to use. That is, we have some homework to be done, right? And what you are saying and making clear is that we are in the beginning of the process, but the process is ongoing. And is that so? Is this the final conclusion of this? Go on, you can speak. Well, I guess that's it. First, because the regulation has to change. Yeah, this is not something that was made and that's it. No. Regulating or developing regulations is a dynamic process. It goes along with the change in the behavior of society and the size of the financial market. And in the case of data use, it's not different. And the role of the regulators to facilitate and to make it happen is huge. But they are not alone. The advantage is that we are with them. And the regulator is a little of what he was saying. I mean, they have the work to regulate the financial system. So we have the NPD, the law, the general law of data protection dealing in the sense, and they all work along with the society, the civil society and so on, and always trying to understand what is going on with the world and the sector to contribute to that and improve the regulation. On our side, regulations are important because they create the good practices, ethics, and financial good practices, fiduciary ones, on how to use data or even the money of our clients. So I think counting on this ecosystem where you have regulators and financial agents and the custodies and the data agents working all together to build what is in fact better for society is mandatory. And the, although we believe we evolved a lot, and we did compared to other countries in the world, I think the Brazilian financial system is quite solid. And everything that we are progressing in regulation and laws about the use and the access to data is higher in the bank compared to big economies abroad. But even though we still have a lot of homework to do. Any other comment? Otherwise, I go to the next question that has to do with culture. And I think it is what we have in the banks. I mean, effective monetization demands a cultural change in the organizations. So you are on the top, but there are people above, a series of chains below you. And data must be dealt as strategic assets and innovation as the central pillar in the business strategy. So then I ask you how to train employees and educate clients that are not a few or millions to extract real value and see opportunities of monetization. Rafa, you? Well, within the framework of having a data-driven and data-inspired organization, traditionally we associate data engineering practices and data visualization and models, and we incorporating specifically to our trail a data governance practice. So this data direction must be sustainable. And these practices that we'll discuss here about privacy and transparency and use with a goal is where, in fact, we have to think about designing solutions in this value convergence. So within the process of culture of a data-driven process, it goes not only through the technical process, but also through aspects of soft skills of these practices that will make, in fact, all this technical framework to be sustainable. Another element that is equally important and that is quite common and critical and essential is the discipline of financial education. That is, the way some concepts of data monetization impact population and clients is quite different from a highly digitalized population. If we compare to a vulnerable population that can be sometimes hiring a product irregularly without even knowing. So these are converging points because financial citizenship also goes through privacy. Well, this is an important point, and now I'd like to ask Leandro, because in this practice of spreading this idea, we saw that PIX increased a lot bankarization. PIX, the pandemic made a lot of people enter to the market, so we have many levels of clients. So how can we make these people understand that data can be monetized, they are important and protect everything, and also in your financial institution? Well, I'll start by the second part, that is the financial institution. The first point is that in the bank, if we analyze our values, we use data for the best decisions as value. So a letter signed by Milton, our CEO, mentions explicitly the use of data as part of our daily life to make the best decisions. So everybody knows it's important. Secondly, establish a strong training process in all levels of organization, exactly as you mentioned in the example of the population. In the organization, it's the same. Each level has a clear training and data analysis and the importance of value, and this is a strong program that we take seriously in the organization. A training plan, and again, it's not going against the technical discussion of data, but we are talking about the custody and the use of data and privacy of data, what data can be used or not, and obviously not everyone has access to every data in the organization. And I think most importantly is that we have to use data to generate benefits. And then we go to the first part of the question. Well, in the process of training, we use some examples. We are used to allow information for free to many companies, and they don't even know what they do with that. But we believe that the company has a criteria of the data, and what they will give back is relevant. And this is the easiest example to understand. I mean, Google. If you go to Google for a search, you are given your preferences, and they save the preferences. And we are doing that with ChatGPT as well. So when you do that, you know they are saving on that because you see marketing on the same topic. And they said, well, I searched for something for the house, and now I can see a lot of ads here. So that's it. But the company uses the company to monetize internally, and we know that. And we believe it's worth it. That's why we keep using, because the benefit of having the search on internet is higher than the data they're giving us. So we believe they will do something good, and in fact they do. Sometimes it's not that relevant, but they do. And in the bank it's the same. So data for us to monetize must be relevant to the client. Example, we give the best offer to clients based on their behavior. When they access the app, somehow we have an area where we can analyze what they are doing because they put prompts there and we can see what they are searching for. What is the pathway they are taking? So using contextual data in a customized and personalized level helps us because we give value, and that's why they give data to the organization. But again, We make it clear that there is privacy in a term that is written to the client in a simple way, and we make everything clear, and we ask for permission for everything. So we say, we'll use that to avoid fraud, okay? And they say, okay. If they say no, we don't use it. Obviously, some operations will be in risk, so they don't complete. But anyways, every point of contact is an opportunity to reinforce the message to our clients on how to use the data and the importance on taking care of the data, because it's worth a lot to them and to us.
It's both oil and uranium, right? Tabitha, explain this a bit more to us. Well, talking about the opinion of BTG Pactual, it, we also saw technology and the use of data as a way of leveraging what we are already doing in terms of personalized services offered to our clients, especially when we think of retail, and when we think of providing services to large populations. When we think about big familiarity with AI and what's happening around the world today, we also believe that capacity building of our own employees is something very important. I heard in today's the presentation by the CIOs, there was this comment saying that we change perspectives when we think of technology and the business area. And the technology has to understand what's going on in the business area, but the business areas also have to know what is happening in terms of technologies to enable us to generate value. That is a consensus. At BTG, we are conducting training programs on AI and on data for the entire company, for all the employees, especially for our executives, exactly to make sure that our corporate employee is able to suggest what is best for the client. You mentioned about the values of Itaú. One of our values is focused on our clients. It has always been so, and for us it's very important that everybody understand, or that have some level of understanding of what we need to offer to our clients, and how to make all of this possible. Okay, back to you, Mina. How do you attract your client into this universe? I'm going to ask a question to our audience to make this knowledge something more tangible. Who looks at ChatGPT at least once a week? Raise your hand. Who uses ChatGPT every day? Raise your hand. Now, ask this question to ChatGPT based on your track record of conversation. Tell me, ChatGPT, what stage of life am I at the moment? Ask this question to ChatGPT. You will see the capacity that personalization has. And we're giving out this information for free. Is this good or bad? Depending on what kind of aggregated value you have for this service. So the population has to learn more and more about this. This is my data. I am granting it to another party. But the point is, if you can generate benefits on top of all of this, then this process of data sharing will become more natural. Obviously, there has to be the trust in the company that we're dealing with, but the sharing of information brings up this benefit, which is the systemic algorithms, personalizing offers. So, so what moment you're at becomes known through this data, and the point is, how can your financial institution help you at the stage of life you're at? But the other point is, how do we prepare ourselves for this? We went through different levels of maturity at the bank, and at one point, everybody said it was decided that everybody has to have access to data, and this is quite peculiar because having the information, doing what to do with the information, and basing your decision on data has to be part of the mission, part of the value of the strategic process of any institution. But dealing with this information, looking after this data, and using this on a daily basis has to be based on a set of hard skills based on your job positions. So what we did in this respect, we defined under a data mesh approach, we defined who is responsible for doing what. Because what we did realize in the course of time, remember that motto, you know, a 2-year-old dog starves to death. Imagine data that has thousands of owners, and you don't know who the data belongs to, who is responsible for this data. If you have to check whether the technique that you use can perform or not. So you have to define this, all of this very clearly, who does what. And based on this, we created a number of capacity building programs, not only from the point of view, but also from the technical point of view. So we have the following careers: data scientist, machine learning, engineering, prompt engineering. And to this end, we have a certification process. And but on the other hand, from the point of business of the business, they also had to go through a process of becoming familiar and becoming prepared for all of this. So what they did was to define everything very clearly, making a decision based on the information that we have is part of the survival of our businesses. Who can do what is something that helped us very clearly to allow to define things very clearly. Who does what, who is responsible. So we have 39 data domains. One domain is investment, another domain is credit cards, and so on. So when I look at each of these domains, I know who is responsible for each domain. I make sure whether this information is being used legally as provided for it. So this is a huge work of transforming the operational model. So a culture is something that is part of our daily lives. The operational model is part of a cultural process. How do I create a process? How do I create an operational model that goes hand in hand with my culture? When you ask the audience who used ChatGPT, everybody raised their hands, and it was very interesting. Then I asked, what is done with your data? Very few people raised their hands, and this is has to do with the culture. So let's tell people, those of you who use ChatGPT, let them know what is being done with this person's data. This is a process that I would like to ask you about. It's out of the script, right? It's off script. So the data that this person is putting through ChatGPT, this is, but also bank data, this is data that can be monetized. And as such, I go to the next question. What examples of monetization, data monetization and valuation of data can you mention to consolidate this concept and put everything in practical terms for this audience? Go ahead, you go first. Well, first of all, I'm going to mention a few basic things. Open finance is the way of monetizing your data. Of course, this monetization is indirect, so when the client decides to open up his financial data to another institution, so the expectation is that institution will look at this data and will contribute to define what the profile of the client is, what moment of his life is he at, and therefore offer the proper products. But so this is a fact. But when we started open banking, very few people joined it because nobody knew how to deal with this information. However, this is changing quite intensely. So most organizations deal appropriately with this data and deliver solutions according to the client's expectations at the moment of the client's life and so on. This is a clear example. There are other in-house examples. Clients do not have visibility, but each data that the client leaves with us, whether it's data related to or data that we derive from his financial transactions, this shows us the way to personalize solutions for the client. We start a conversation, with a recurrent conversation with the client, bringing solutions for his daily life. So this is a good example of how we use this information. We use the information to design offers, products, understand what is the best value proposition for each client. So This is the example, but there are other cases which are quite somewhat different. For example, the behavior of people when they are buying and using credit cards and debit cards in the POS points of sale network chain. Well, when all of this is aggregated with identifying who this person is, has incredible value for our client legal entity. So the legal entity looks at all this information and says, now I'm doing less than what I should, because in this region, on average, companies that have in the same category have a higher ticket. So you start to bring this information and send it out to specific segments. For example, SMEs, thereby helping the SMEs to make their business decision. And this is, we offer this as a service to our clients. There are countless examples in this respect. But the main point is everything that we do. I don't want to be a data broker, but we want to use the data for the benefit of our clients. In so many words. Yes. A few words on our vision on the use of data and model and LLMs. And we feel that we can use this data, especially as regards client. So, for example, events that I can mention. There was a recent launch in our conversational chat, and we had a chat with our direct client that allowing you to conduct a transaction, sending an audio or sending a photo of the Peak's password, and by doing so we can speed things up and facilitate this bank transactions. This is an AI agent that is doing this kind of work, and this has been a huge success and shows how you can facilitate your clients' lives, obviously with security as a huge part of this, and also there has to be permission of the client, and transactional limits have to be placed by the client as well. So it's one of the very practical examples of how we make clients' life easier. Another example that are part of our apps is PFMs, the classification of which have been the types of bank expenses of our client once this client conducts his transaction. And this allows for a better control and better knowledge of the client himself and the type of expenses he incurs. And as BD Factual, this allows us to personalize the client's journeys based on what he consumes to a greater extent or where he spends his money. And so when we think of automation and accelerations, for example, in our back office and operations, you are making things speedier. You're making customer service work at a faster pace. And when we use AI and technology to improve the standardization of costs and so on, you're making your systems more stable, faster to be built up on. And this allows us to focus on what is best for our client. So this is what we see. We focus on different sectors in a direct way, but also in a way that is properly distributed to ensure that we will be successful. So, okay, tell us, so before answering your question, I came to the conclusion that I'm not going to leave here without answering your question, everybody's questions, on what do companies do with our data. But this will be a kind of conversation between the two of us. How many times did you open up the policy privacy and to see everything? The one that you check, I agree with the public privacy policy. How many times did you have the patience to read through all this? I read it all the time. No, not true. I don't read it. I always agree. If you want to know what the company does with your data, read the privacy policy. Has anybody ever heard the privacy policy here? Who has read it? Raise your hand. So these people should have raised their hand and may ask the question, what does the bank do with our data? I'll ask GTP now.
Isso aí é uma coisa que ninguém, assim, ler é realmente.
I believe that very few people really read the privacy policy. We invested a lot of time to create a privacy policy that reflects the real use of this information. So we invested time with the legal department, the compliance department, with products. So this was very important for us to define exactly what we would do with this data. And of course, this goes hand in hand with transparency, which is the principle of data policy. If anybody has any question of what people are doing with their data, go to the company that you're sharing your data with and read the privacy policy. Speaking of which, you can see the name of the data protection owner. You have the name of the bank executive who is the data protection owner. Exactly. I never read it because I'm afraid not to agree, and then what? And then you're not accepted, because if you do not agree with the way on how your data will be used, you just do not accept it. You have used any of those apps that change the face of the person? If you read the privacy policy, you're not going to agree to it.
Quer dizer, depois do tamanho, você falou de peso.
You talked about, I mean, your height and your weight can become important data. But how do we deal with all of this? Well, I gave you a very simple example, which is based on the height and weight of the person. But the issue of variables, which are instrumental to personal data, this is very relevant. When we work on LLM models, we have these variable interactions. Nobody here will information that gender is the pertinent information of a specific model. So unless you are guided, you're focused on data privacy, you can include the share of expenses in category 72.9 based on the statement of expenses of credit cards. And this expense can be seen as having been expense at a beauty parlor, for example, and this is related to gender. So it's not acceptable for this kind of variable to be part of this. This is related to the question they asked before me, because the problems have not been resolved, because as techniques become more sophisticated, there will be other instrumental variables related to specific situations. A classic case in Brazil is the zip code, the postal code. The postal code can be related to a racial issue. You might think that is a great variable to include in your model, but it's totally unacceptable. There are statistics that are leveraged by IA to support us in identifying these desirable patterns. I'm going to come out of this. We're coming to the end. But data security. We're talking about this, but my data, your data, how does data security work? How do institutions deal with this kind of security? It's almost a physical security of data. We talk a lot about, there's a lot of money associated to this. Tabata, let me ask you first.
Combinado. O pessoal falou bastante aqui de governança.
You talked a lot about governance, and this is a very valid topic, because you have to think not only who has access to your data, but what data makes sense to the people who are accessing your data. You don't need the client's sensitive information. We're talking about the big data architecture. You can use a password that does not identify your client to generate a conclusion or to see a KPI. You don't have to have all these details about the client that is conducting any kind of transactions. At BTG, we provide access to what makes sense, not only per areas, because we have different business segments and different products being shared, but also what is necessary, what is actually necessary. So the possibility of having technology that allow you to work on this data mesh that allows you to have access to only what our employees really need. This is a big issue. In addition, obviously, we need to have a very well prepared team of security officers so that your architecture is totally robust according to the standards. Rafa,
Conta pra gente aqui.
So Rafa, are data safe and secure, or is it a myth? Well, I think we work non-stop to ensure, as a financial institution, a core value of our primary relation with clients, and it is trust. Trust goes through security. So, I mean, what was simple in the past and expected, and what made people to give us their money is to trust that the following day their money would be there. And in an industry that is quite volatile with many cycles, economic cycles and hyperinflation, we clearly have a positive bias of the survivors that are the organizations that kept strong, solid by generating this relation and connection with the clients. There's another panel now that is super interesting, and Chris is talking there. And I think they are dealing with how AI against AI, because in the more complex technologies that we talk here, that will help us personalize and have unique experiences, the same technology that is making more powerful massive attacks. So the same technology that summarizes big content in ChatGPT is the one that, based on fake premises, generate fake news. So in the organizations, we have a discipline that is of constant balance, and with a good battle that is the compliance structure and security risks. And we will always want to do more and make a new service and have something innovative. And these guys will always be teasing us and establishing guardrails and control tiers, so that while we follow this movement, we keep this mandatory value that is security and trust. Leandro, do you agree? Totally. In Itaú, data is safe, completely safe, and it goes through what Cavalcante mentions here. First of all, technologically, we apply the best solutions to ensure data security. Not all clients' data is there. It is all digitalized, and this is an important line of defense. And secondly, we have strong policies of access and access to data. So probably we won't access when we need. So we have techniques for that, as BTG does, and it's quite clear here that we have data for the identification of people that are available. You can do models and identify behaviors without identifying the person. So technologically, on the one hand, we have that, and then we have the personal lines, and we have three lines of defense, as Cavalcante mentioned. The one that is using the data is the first line that lets nothing happen to data. The second line of defense for operational risks analyze if the processes are insured in such a way that it will ensure that data is managed in a safe way. And then we have the third one that is audit, that also analyzes processes and so on. So I'll say that we have all this machinery, and this is not with machines, just a figure of speech. But anyways, to control or to ensure that our clients' data is safe. And then we have the ethical lines to know that the application of data is not breaking any ethics in the organization. Remember that in big organizations, we have clients in different elements. So maybe the competition can be a client of other segment. So being careful in managing the data is very important. So you that are the only global ones. So, well, I'm thinking of what to say because they've already said everything. So I'll do the following. I'll give another look to that. Data security is always analyzed in two dimensions. One is if you want to attack my data that is here in the bank from outside. Today we have 7 tiers of security until we get to data. That goes from internet until data. So we have these 7 tiers of security. I won't get into details, but it's extremely secure. So it makes us quite safe on that and to the outside world. But internally, we must be careful and monitor because if we have any kind of problem from inside out, how to solve that? In Santander, we decided something that is the information bubble, that basically everything that is information is in a closed bubble so that you cannot get the data and copy to their machine or download the information. It is there in a universe in which data cannot leak. So if I am working uh, in a bad way to extract data from a spreadsheet and send to my personal email, I cannot do that. First, I cannot extract. If I can, the DLP will get the information. So we have tiers on how to use that. And we have to follow the bank secrecy law. So can you use all information, or what kind of information monitoring to implement? So we have a series of them, like if you click select in my the information of my account, I would say, why does anyone want to select on my information on something that we use for payment of salaries? So why do you want that? So it triggers a message to the competent authority, so it is a way of monitoring the good use of information internally, besides everything that my colleagues mentioned. Wonderful. So everything that is good gets to an end, so we have to finish. And with your final considerations, I'd like to hear why to the clients and people data monetization is a good option. So can I, Gustavo, get my data and sell and make money with that? So why is it good? Tabata, please. You started, so you finish.
Acredito que o letramento e você entender.
I believe that literacy and understanding well technology is quite important. It is what we preach in BTG. It's important for people to know this technology, that as many raise their hands, they are using daily. And when we talk about the use of bank data of our clients, to summarize a little of what happened in this panel, the central bank is always contributing for this understanding to be in shipping. So as a client, I have the autonomy and I define with whom I'll share the information and how. And knowing the institutions and understanding what they are doing in customization also allows you to understand if it is in fact using it for good or not, if they are adding value and if they are in fact using it the best way possible. I would say that understanding and knowing the institution is understanding the technology that is more popular. So I also reinforce that, well, we are talking about AI for a while and data for a while. It's quite a relevant topic that is generating more and more knowledge, and it is a topic that is fostering. So FEBRABAN this year is basically discussing only the use of data. So I would say that it's good for people to know the institutions and know about the topic. Renato, please.
De forma geral, acho que...
Well, in general, the discussion on selling data is something that goes to many other dilemmas. But one thing I know for sure, clients are more and more entitled to their own data and the decision of that with the transparency, and it is reverted in added value to the client. So if I decide to share my information, if I decide to give my information to the bank or take information from the competition to bring here, it is a way of selling data in a different way. I want to sell for a better price, credit, or experience, and doing that gives the client the power of decision, and the sector is concerned more and more about the client and how to comply with the client's needs in a comprehensive way. So it puts the client in the core and makes the client that is entitled to the information decides what is best to them. Thank you, Rafa. I think every perception of value existing in the organizations and clients is a monetization view. So there is a point on trading this information that is secondary when the perception of value is tangible with a clear benefit to each one of us, whether in the relation with the financial institution or any financial service we use.
Last but not least.
Leandro, last but not least. Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think that literacy and education is mandatory. It's the most important point in this relation. To make it clear to the client how we treat their data, to which moments we give the certainty that we are treating best their data as their financial assets. So as I said before, is the way of using all the points of contact. A silly example, if a client comes to the bank with a physical copy of the document, we destroy it immediately if the client doesn't want to take it home, because the person responsible for the bank say, well, we don't need it. We have no physical document. If it's digital, it goes to the bubble because we also have ours. So every moment we are reinforcing the care we have to take with data and the importance data have. So to us, this is how we generate value to the clients and the bank. So I totally agree with my colleague in terms of literacy being the most important point. And you leave your data if you have benefit, because data is now the new oil and uranium, and it can bring benefits or not to every people. Well, a good lecture is the one that goes over time, so I thank you all on behalf of FEBRABAN, and we hope you stay here because we'll have a show, and see you next in the next FEBRABAN Tech. Thank you very much.